Hello, boys and girls. It's been a long time since we've had story, so I'm going to begin by reading chapter 20 over so we can remember what was going on in the story. Everyone remember this book? I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. Chapter 20, Grump and Brat. The crew woke stiff and cranky the next morning, moaning at the bright light now shining through the little window. "Oh, that horrid light!" whined Amalthea. "My poor head is pounding already."
"Ouch, my back," groaned Roger. "It feels like I slept in a stroke barrel."
Snow White woke with a groan. When she sat up, her long black hair stuck out like branches on a tree. Her eyes were still swollen from crying, and part of her face was indented where she slept against the rough stones. She looked monstrous. She stretched and yawned and, let out a gust of foul breath worthy of a troll. "I don't know how you dwarfs sleep on such horribly hard, bumpy beds," she said. "I didn't sleep at all well."
"Great," I said. "We'll take the beds and you can sleep on the floor."
"A princess sleep on the floor?" said Snow White. "Unfathomable! It wouldn't be proper. It's not proper that I'm living in these conditions at all."
"You're free to leave at any time," I said.
"Don't be ridiculous," said Snow White. "You know I can't go anywhere. The huntsman might be waiting right outside to kill me." "Will he kill us all, do you think?" cried Amalthea. "No," said Snow White with great solemnity. "It's me the queen wants dead. Of course she would be very angry if she knew you were protecting me. But don't worry, I won't let any harm come to you." Amalthea sighed in relief. "Thank you, Princess." "You're welcome," said Snow White. "As your princess, I have a duty to protect you."
I snorted. "Well, crew, shall we start digging?" said Epidot. "I've already started," said a muffled voice. We turned to find Garnisha digging furiously by the back wall. She was already a dwarf length down, tossing out dirt so fast it was piling up on the table and sprinkling on our heads. Everyone gathered their axes and moved to join in, but when I lined up, Epidot held up his hand. "Not you, Seventh," he said. "What do you mean?" "What do you mean? What does he mean?" sneered Roger. "Someone's got to get rid of all that rubble. That's your job, Grump." "And you need to stay with the princess," Epidot said in a low voice. "You are bound to protect her, after all." My beard twitched. I didn't need a reminder. "Stay safe, princess," said Herkimer. "Don't let any other humans inside. Or bears." "And if that huntsman comes," said Amalthea, "put your hands over your heart and scream and get down as low into the earth as you can." "Don't worry about me," said Snow White. "I'm a lot stronger than I look." By now, Garnisha had dug a hole deep and wide enough for everyone to fit inside and work. Everyone except me. They dug and dug, flinging the dirt and rocks in all directions inside the cottage. I worked to move it all outside as well as I could, though it was difficult to keep up. I didn't have a wheelbarrow or even a shovel. I had to use the strog pot as a bucket and my bare hands to scoop up the rocks and dirt. "Here, let me help," said Snow White. She tried to take the pot to empty it, but it was too heavy for her. She dropped it and spilled all the dirt. "Sorry," said Snow White. I bent down to pick up the pot. At the same time, Snow White tried to scoop the dirt back into the pot, but instead dropped it right over my head. "I'm so sorry." Snow White reached to brush all the dirt off me, but I jumped back. "Leave it," I shouted. "Just get away from me." "I was only trying to help," said Snow White. "Then stay out of my way," I said between clenched teeth. I scooped the dirt back into the pot. As I dumped it out the window, Leaf came flying inside. He flew right over my head and landed on the table in front of Snow White. "Oh!" she cried. "Leaf, come here," I said. I needed to get him back inside my shirt before Snow White started screaming and breaking everything in the cottage.
"Hello, little fellow. Are you hungry?"
Snow White held out one of the sour berries. Leaf nibbled it right from her hand and squeaked with delight, moving a little closer. Snow White smiled.
"Aren't you sweet?"
She reached out a finger as though to pet him, but I snatched him up. "He doesn't like humans," I said. "You frighten him."
"Oh, I'm sorry," said Snow White. "He seemed friendly."
"Well, he's not. Not to you, anyway." I wrapped Leaf's wings around him and shoved him inside my shirt. He squeaked in protest for a moment, then settled into sleep. I went back to work, scooping up the rubble and dumping it out the window. Snow White sat at the table and watched. Occasionally, she opened her mouth to say something, probably to tell me how I was doing it wrong or boss me around. But one look from me, and she kept quiet. Finally, I had gotten most of the dirt out. The crew had dug deep enough that the dirt and rubble came less often. I slumped onto a stool, exhausted. Snow White cleared her throat a little. I turned to her and raised one eyebrow, wondering what she would dare say to me at this point.
"What should we do now?" she asked.
"We?" I said. "You can do whatever you want. I'm going outside." There was no way I would be stuck in this cottage all day with the princess.
"Perfect! I'll go with you."
Snow White jumped up from the table. "You can't go outside," I said. "What if someone sees you?"
"Who will see me? Everyone thinks I'm dead. We're deep in the woods, and no one is looking for me. Besides, I can search for my own food. I need to eat something besides rats and beetles."
"I doubt you can find much better," I said.
"Oh, can't I?"
She marched to the door and left without so much as a backward glance. I sat at the table and tossed pebbles out the window. In 10 minutes, she'd probably come back to me crying and hungry, begging me to find her food. 10 minutes passed, and she didn't return. Another 10, and nothing. After an hour, I started to imagine what could have happened to her. She'd probably gotten lost. She was probably curled up beneath a tree, crying and trembling with fright. A bear might be lurking in the woods, ready to eat her. With that thought, my beard tugged me to go find her. As much as I enjoyed the quiet, I couldn't let her be alone out there. It didn't take long to find her. Snow White was neither lost nor frightened. She was kneeling by the stream with a whole pile of food, much to my chagrin. She'd found wild carrots and onions, and a few other roots and things I didn't recognize. She scrubbed all the dirt off in the stream, humming while she worked. She even managed to catch a few fish with her bare hands, which impressed me, though I tried hard not to show it. I stood back from the stream, half hidden behind a shrub. I didn't think she knew I was there, until a splash of cold water hit me in the face and took my breath away. Snow White laughed as she dried off her hands. Then she saw me scowling.
"Oh, I'm sorry," she said, still laughing a little. "I was just trying to play."
I stomped back toward the cottage, dripping wet, beard twitching. I hoped the bear did come and eat her. As I drew nearer the cottage, I was struck by how starkly it stood out through the trees. Anyone passing within 50 feet would notice it, and that put the whole colony at risk. I wondered if there was some way to disguise it. Perhaps I could pile up the dirt from the tunnel and make it look like a hill instead of a cottage. That would be a good way to keep busy and away from Snow White. So I set to work gathering the dirt, piling it up around the cottage, and making a slope that would blend with the roof.
"What are you doing?"
Snow White asked, carrying her pile of food in her skirt. She was sopping wet, like she'd given herself a bath in the stream.
"Covering up the cottage," I said. "Someone could see it and wonder who lives here. If they see you, they could report it to the queen." "You're doing all this to protect me?"
"And the crew," I said. I didn't want her to think I cared all that much about her. I don't want the queen to know we're here either. Snow White set down her bundle of food by the door, put her hands on her hips, surveying my work with a critical eye.
It might help if you add some bigger rocks beneath the dirt. Otherwise, when it rains, it will all just wash away.
I gritted my teeth. What do you know about dirt or rocks?
Snow White looked startled. Not nearly so much as dwarves, I'm sure. I'm only trying to be helpful.
If you want to be helpful, just go inside. Eat your food. Snow White looked hurt for a brief moment, but then she smoothed her face.
Fine, she said. I'll leave you to it.
She picked up her food and went back into the cottage. When the crew returned from the tunnel that evening, they were carrying a long rectangle of stone.
"We made you a bed, Princess," said
Epidot. "It was my idea," said Garnetia proudly.
"I cut the big stone."
They set the bed beneath the window. The top was smooth and dipped ever so slightly to cradle Snow White's body. The sides were ornately carved with all kinds of things from the surface, or at least the things I brought into the cottage, leaves and grass, berries and mushrooms, and something that sort of looked like a rat. "And see here," Roger pointed, "I carved some beebles."
Snow White clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, it is beautiful! I've never had such a lovely bed, even if it is quite hard. But you are all such dear little dwarfs."
And she kissed each of them on the head. Some of them shrank from her touch, but bore it with patience. Gilpin seemed to enjoy it. The tips of his ears turned blue. I kept well out of the way. Epidot reported that they had dug nearly 50 feet, but still had no sense of where the main tunnels were. "But we found some good deposits of limestone and quartz, so we'll have a hearty supper tonight." Snow White sat at the head of the table, and the crew all gathered around her, eager to hear what she had done that day, and curious about the food she'd gathered.
"My father used to take me for walks through the woods, and he taught me all about the plants and things so I could survive if I needed to. Wasn't that smart?"
She let them taste her food if they wished, which all did except Roger. He was a little hesitant after his experience with beetles. "It's so squishy," said Herkimer, chewing on the fish. Garnetia sampled the carrot. She probably thought since it was orange, it might taste something like citrine.
"It's so soft," she said. "I feel like my teeth are melting."
After supper, the crew all gathered around Snow White's new bed. She told human stories from the surface, ones where humans went on quests for magic and fought dragons and demons. The crew listened with rapt attention. In the middle of a silly story about talking birds and bunnies, Leaf crawled out of my shirt. He perched on my shoulder for a minute. He seemed to be listening too. After Snow White said, "The end," Leaf flew off my shoulder and landed on Snow White's head. He crawled down her hair and squeaked in her ear. I expected Snow White to scream and slap him away. Instead, she laughed and pet his head.
"Oh, you want another story, do you?"
"I do too," said Roger. "Human stories are fascinating." "Leaf, get off her," I said. "She doesn't want you there."
"Oh, he's all right," said Snow White.
But I wasn't going to have it. I reached for Leaf, but he screeched at me and hid himself in Snow White's hair.
"Oh, let him stay there for now," said Snow White. "I don't mind."
"Traitor," I muttered under my breath.
"Once upon a time," said Snow White, "there was a princess who was much beloved by her kingdom." She went on to tell one of the most absurd tales I'd ever heard. The princess was blessed by 11 fairies, but cursed by an evil fairy, and doomed to prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. Years later, the princess did prick her finger on a spinning wheel and fell as though dead. I thought that was the end of the story, but it went on. "The princess slept in a tower for 100 years," said Snow White, "until a prince came along. He knew the princess was his true love, so he kissed her awake and then lived happily ever after. The end."
I snorted. "That's ridiculous."
"It's not ridiculous at all," said Snow White. True love's kiss is the most magical thing in the world.
But you said she'd been sleeping for 100 years.
So?
So the prince wasn't 100 years old. He was born while she was asleep. How could it be true love if he never even met her?
It was love at first sight.
But the princess couldn't see him. She was asleep. So how could it be love at first sight?
Well, I don't have to explain it, said Snow White. It's magic. Don't dwarves believe in magic?
We do indeed, princess, said Epidot. In fact, it's thanks to dwarves that humans know of magic. We taught it to them in the beginning.
Though your kind is rather clumsy with magical powers, said Garnisha, if you'll forgive my saying so.
And we can all agree that there's no such thing as a magical kiss, I said.
I don't believe you, said Snow White, her little nose sticking up in the air. I'll bet true love's kiss could break your curse.
What curse? You mean the curse of having to put up with a bratty princess?
No, I mean the one you were born with. You're cursed with grumpiness.
The entire crew erupted with laughter, encouraging Snow White to go on.
You're such a grump. In the kingdom it would be your name.
The crew laughed all the harder. Roger was wiping tears away. Very good, Princess, he said. I often call him Grump, too. Herkimer clutched at his stomach, and Gilpin's ears twitched as though they were having silent fits of laughter. Well, then your name should be Spoiled Brat, I shouted, but they were all laughing too hard to hear me, or they didn't care. I stalked outside and slammed the door. I paced back and forth in front of the cottage. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block the sounds of laughter and merriment. After a minute, the door opened and Gilpin appeared. He waved for me to come back inside. No, I said, they don't want me around, and I don't want to be around them either. He tugged on my sleeve with a pleading look. I yanked my arm free. Just leave me alone. Gilpin frowned. His ears flopped down as he shut the door. I crouched against the cottage and watched the last light fade from the sky. Through the window, I heard Epidot announce that it was time for sleep. But I want to hear more human stories, said Amalthea. I'll help tuck you in, said Snow White, and then I'll sing you a lullaby. Oh, humans sing, do they? asked Herkimer. We dwarves are very fond of singing. Music has a magic all its own.
I quite agree, said Snow White. Now get into bed. You have to close your eyes as though you're going to sleep. I heard the grind and scrape of shifting stones as the crew readied for bed. Will you slam this rock on top of my head, Princess? asked Amalthea. But won't that hurt you? Snow White asked. Oh no, it calms me down. I never sleep well without a good head crushing, especially here on the surface. There was a thump. Ah, that's better, thank you. Once the crew were all settled, Snow White began to sing. The song was almost as silly as her stories. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky.
Diamonds, Roger burst in. I love diamonds. They're my favorite.
Soon the entire crew were singing along with Snow White, Gilpin whistling the tune. I felt a little chip in my chest. How was it that in just 2 days a human could be more part of the crew than I ever was? One by one, the crew nodded off to sleep until the cottage was silent. I rested my head against the wall. My eyes grew heavy, and I was starting to fall asleep myself, when suddenly I sensed a presence and snapped awake. Snow White was standing right above me. I'm sorry we quarreled, she said. I shrugged. It was rude of me to poke fun at you. You've been kind to me. You saved my life.
It was nothing, I grumbled. Wasn't like I had a choice in the matter.
Maybe nothing to you, said Snow White, but it's everything to me, and I want to show you my gratitude. This isn't much, but it's all I have that would be of any worth to you." She held something out to me. It was her ruby ring. The ruby was small, but very fine indeed. The pungent smell was intoxicating. "I don't want it," I said, turning away. Rubies were what the queen had used to manipulate me into liking her, trusting her. I wouldn't be so foolish now. "Why not?" said Snow White. "Gilpin told me that they're your favorite." "How? Gilpin can't talk," I said. "He talks in his own way," she said, "and he's very fond of you. Please, take it." Snow White pried the gold prongs open around the ruby, and it fell out of the ring. My hand shot out reflexively, and I caught the ruby in the center of my palm. "There, it's yours now," said Snow White. She waited. "Aren't you going to eat it?" "I told you, I don't want it." I held it back up to her. "I don't want it either," said Snow White. "Fine, neither of us wants it." I hurled the ruby into the dark night. "Oh!" Snow White let out a tiny yelp. There was silence for a moment, and then Snow White said, "That ruby belonged to my mother." "You said you didn't want it." "It was a gift, a peace offering, and you just threw it away like it was nothing." "I don't want your peace offering," I hissed. "I know what you're trying to do. I know what you're doing to the rest of the crew. All you humans are the same. You only care about other creatures as far as they can benefit you. Well, I'm no fool, and you can't bribe me." Snow White stiffened and backed away. "Fine," she said in a cool voice. "If that's the way you feel about it, good night, Grump." She slipped back inside and slammed the door shut. "Spoiled brat," I muttered. I stayed outside all night and shivered all through my sleep. I preferred to freeze to death than be anywhere near those rubble-headed fools, especially Snow White. And that's the end of our chapter for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We'll be hearing more later.